You're live. Okay, good morning. Welcome everybody to the CoFence Email Security Quarter 2 2024 Phishing Intelligence and Quarterly Trends Brief. I know a lot of you have attended our previous webinars here for the quarterlies and the annuals, as we do at their respective times. So I thank you all for those who are repeat joiners here and attending this webinar, and for our group of people who are newly attending, this being their first one. We hope that you get something out of it. We are actually updating our format here for this presentation, and we actually have a guest speaker here who's going to kick us off. So I would like to introduce, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dave Van Allen, CEO of CoFence. He would like to address our audience here briefly in the beginning, and then we'll hop into the details of what we saw during Q2. So Dave, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, that's great. Thanks, Jared, very much. I really appreciate it. We don't have to be quite that formal. Good day, everyone. Welcome to the CoFence PhishMe email security update. I'm thrilled to be here today because I always enjoy having the opportunity to talk to both our customers and prospects and people from the media who are curious about CoFence. So to our customers joining us today, thank you very much for your business and the opportunity to serve you. We strive every day to be the best partner for you and your business when it comes to email security. For those who are just getting to know us, happy to see you here. We hope that we could show you some factual information about current email phishing risks and how CoFence PhishMe helps our worldwide customers significantly reduce the risk of email-based cyber attacks. We do this using a combination of our email security awareness training with risk validation and our unique phishing detection and response platform that's powered by our network of over 35 million CoFence trained employees operating in every sector of industry around the world, who are watching and reporting in real time the most sophisticated and dangerous zero-day attacks that get past even the best technology out there. We refer to it as seg misses or secure email gateway misses. And it's not a knock on secure email gateways. They're just as good as they are on knowledge of what is out there. What CoFence has is the knowledge of what is coming at you. It's sort of like what's in your backyard today that's going to be in your front yard in hours or in a short period of time that could really have a bad effect on revenue or reputation in your business. And that's kind of where we stand out. So we're an augmentation to your security profile, sort of bookends, where we use humans, your employees on the beginning to train, because literally if all of our employees just didn't click on bad things accidentally, we actually wouldn't be here today. 95% of all the cyber attacks would have vanished instantly. So I'm really happy to have the opportunity to kick off the session today. I'm super proud of the team that we have here for you and who are backed up by hundreds of others who work every day to help reduce your risk of, like I said, having a good employee tricked into doing a bad thing. I'd just like to update you just a bit on where CoFence is investing over the rest of the year. You may have seen our recent addition to PhishMe, the Employee Engagement Index. We're super excited about this. This enhancement to the popular training platform, which this company started well over a decade ago, enables your employees to be effective first line of defense when you look at your cybersecurity efforts. If you haven't explored this new addition to PhishMe, please do. It's part of what some call human risk management. We prefer to call it employee engagement and support. We like to take a positive attitude toward enabling employees, and we don't like to associate employees with risk. We'd rather associate employees with the ability to reduce your risk. CoFence has also been working with AI for years, and that just seems to be the big buzzword these days. And we probably know where AI works and where it doesn't better than anyone else in the email and phishing security industry. We've literally been working with models for almost 3.5 years now, and we know that it is a quiver. It's an arrow in your quiver. It's just another tool, but it's an important tool that can be used in the right place. And we've got two places that we are using language models today to help enhance our product. One is in our AI spam models, which is in our remediation solutions that we're going to be rolling out very, very soon. You'll hear more about that coming up. So I'm sort of letting the cat out of the bag a little bit, but I guess I get to do that. We see big improvements in our detection and removal systems with our newest language models at work. So please get curious about that and check that out with your account rep here. Also, we use AI in our phishing detection center. Our phishing detection center is where we collect over the course of a month, almost 1 million reported suspected phishing emails from those 35 million Cofense trained employees, your employees actually, out there that are reporting this 0-day stuff. We see one bad instance that gets through the technology per minute of every day. We're talking about 1,500 a day that are crippling, bad, malicious email phishing attempts that are either credential phishings or business email compromise, malware. We see 1,500 of those a day and report them back into our customer base. And either our customers can then remediate on their own if they choose to, or they can use our automated remediation to pull those out of all of their employees' inboxes. Those are the two areas that we use AI in a very, very specific way. And I hope you'll let us tell you more about that as time goes on. But today, we're going to talk about what the threats are like out there. What are we seeing right now? And I think you'll enjoy it. We have time at the end for Q&A, and I encourage everyone to make this a discussion where we can all learn. So thanks again. I really appreciate everybody being here. I'll toss it over to Jared and Max.
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, that's an excellent intro. We covered a lot there, and to your point, exactly. This is meant to be an interactive session. We are going to cover a lot of what we saw in Q2 of 2024 here, but we'll compare it to some of the historic trends from both Q1 as well as across the landscape of 2023 as well. In the spirit of being interactive, you do have a question section right below the window here where you're seeing us speak and present. So I do ask that if you do have any questions, please just throw them in there at any time. We do have a dedicated Q&A towards the end there, so we'll get to those and address them as they come in. So yeah, thank you again, DVA, and we'll hop into this. So my name is Jared Slotich. I'm the product manager for Cofense Intelligence here. And along with me, as always, is my right-hand man, Max Gannon, who is the manager of the Cyber Threat Intelligence Analyst team. His team is responsible for the majority of the analysis that we do here and all the research and report writing that is the Cofense Intelligence product. So those of you who are intelligence subscribers, you will see all of the content that he and his team are generating and reporting out via the email notifications, as well as when you log into Threat HQ and you are doing your threat research in there. So thanks for joining me, Max. We're looking forward to another good session here. The agenda for today is going to be comprised of pretty much the overall landscape, some notable trends that we saw, and we are going to dive into some of the more nuanced ones that are what we decided or have found to be the big key topics from the quarter, as well as some of the use cases that are probably more directly applicable to a lot of you in the audience here. From there, we are also going to continue on looking at not just the malware and the delivery mechanisms involved in those events, but we will also take a look at the credential phishing ones. So as many of you know, Intelligence primarily divides the event types into two main buckets, either being credential phishing or malware. And obviously, there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of overlap between those, between many of those. But some of them are purely just malware events. Some of them are credential, information stealing events, right? And so we will delineate the two, give you some real world examples, events that are actually hitting end users' inboxes, right? And that's one of the key differentiators here at Cofense Intelligence. To Dave's point about SEG protecting environments and SEGs themselves being valuable, we thoroughly agree with that statement, and we advertise that here. Cofense Intelligence is a complementary capability that only enhances your security on top of your other security appliances, right? There's a lot of discussion about how we are in competition with, but that is absolutely not what our intended output is here. We are here to make sure that we are protecting our customers in the best way, and to the best of our abilities, really. So that requires a holistic approach, a full security stack, and human vetted intelligence, enabling even deeper dives and intuitive analysis. From there, we will wrap it up with predictions, as always, based off of what we've seen in the threat landscape from this year and previous. We have a couple of really big trends that we've been monitoring for a long time, and we're going to highlight how those are evolving and what we predict to see in Q3 and beyond. So some of the highlights that we saw from this past quarter here in Q2 of 2024. One really big movement was that it was NJRAT and the amount of volume increase that we saw. There's a lot of different contributing factors for this, not just NJRAT, but RAT, the remote access Trojans, and the volume increase that we're seeing there. So a lot of it can be tied to a power vacuum, essentially. Early this year, we have not seen a lot of the historically popular noisy malware campaigns or even credential phishing campaigns, which do generate a lot of volume historically. But we are still seeing, so in that vacuum of those more notable big botnets and some of the other delivery mechanisms, we are seeing the popularity rise, in particular within Q2 of remote access Trojans, and specifically NJRAT itself. So for those of you who are digesting our intelligence product, you will be familiar with the indicators of compromise that we publish out. So with that, with ingestion of our threat feed, with reading our strategic analyses on these topics here, you are better and able to protect yourself from these specific types of attacks, to include all the IOCs that are included within NJRAT attacks and their vectors. We are also looking at, you can call it sentiment analysis, but really it's content analysis, content of payloads, content of campaigns. And one of the big notable things that we saw was the policy theme. So there's different themes, whether it's, it could be policy, it could be finance, it could be banker. Policy specifically went up 566%. That is a very, notable, anomalous movement on our trend lines. So we continue to monitor it and continue to monitor it through the rest of the year, and that'll come up in some of the predictions towards the end here. But what wasn't necessarily surprising was the uptick in the tax themes that we saw from quarter one into quarter two. As most of you know, here within the United States, taxes are due early in quarter two. So it's very suspected that we would see a large uptick towards the end of quarter one and definitely continuing through quarter two. So that was very expected, but definitely something we wanted to note and present to our audience here. One thing that we have monitored for quite a while is the Microsoft HTML file extensions. This is it's a legitimate file extension, but its abuse has increased by quite a substantial margin this past quarter here. We overall, you see in the bullet point there, it says 2% of all delivery mechanisms. Now that may seem like a pretty small number, but it's, again, we're looking at historic trends over time. So any notable movement in those trend lines, whether it's only 2%, doesn't really matter. The fact is that it is actually being implemented and used as an attack vector by more and more threat actors, leading to an 88% increase in our reported events. So 2% overall by the entire threat landscape. Again, seems like a small number. However, we are very keen to identify anomalous ticks like this and dive in deeper. And you can see that that is reflected in our reports there. So we're also seeing a decrease. So increases are notable, but decreases are as well, right? So the .ru or the Russia domain decreased from 10% in the previous quarter to 3% for stage 2. Right, so stage 2 is the landing page in the attack chain. This can be used. Stage 2s can offer can serve up these malicious files, or they can host the credential phishing pages. But we look at it globally, right? So we're looking at where these sites are being hosted, where these files are being delivered from, and we noticed that there is a 7% decrease quarter over quarter. This is for a variety of reasons, right? I think that most notably we can say comfortably that that the nation of Russia is a little bit otherwise occupied in events elsewhere. And so there's a lot of different contributing factors that could be leading to this decrease. But because of the global conflicts that we've been experiencing for 2.5, almost 3 years now involving the nation of Russia, that could be a contributor and a reason why we're seeing a decrease here. It's not just physical boundaries on borders, it's also boundaries in cyberspace. So anything coming from Russia or being hosted in Russia has always been looked at with a increased amount of scrutiny. But I believe that the threat actor activity that we're seeing across the board has actually decreased due to real world events shifting their focus elsewhere outside of cyberspace is what I refer to. And then lastly, within quarter 2, we had a very large multinational law enforcement campaign that crippled several of the botnets. And we'll dive into that in a later slide here. But this is on the heels of early quarter 3, 2023, where there was not first of its kind, but first in a very long time, massive LEO takedown operation that was targeting the CACBot network, and we saw the effects from that. So again, we'll dive into that further in another slide here towards later on in the presentation, but I'd like to mention it here so we can look forward to that. So talking about secure email gateways, what is getting through, right? This is relevant to all of you because this is what is reaching your end users' inboxes. Again, I just want to reiterate that SEGs are important. They are part of the security stack that you need, that your corporation or that your company needs to invest in. Absolutely. But they only know what they know, right? They are essentially a block or allow list capability. And as long as they are being continuously updated, then that's great. But this is where human vetted intelligence comes in over top and serves as a force multiplier, an enabler of better and timely quality information. So you can see that just in Q2, we saw all of these threats observed in SEG protected environments. Notably, Darkgate Rat there, second from the top on the left column. Darkgate and Peekabot were two of the families that filled the void after the CACBot takedown from early Q3 of last year that I just mentioned. But we're also seeing some other notable families that have been around for a long time. Luma Stealer, X-Worm Rat, the ubiquitous Agent Tesla, which has always been around and will continue to be around. Rather surprising, though, because a lot of the baseline capability and characteristics of Agent Tesla are known at this point, right? It's over 10 years old. And the fact that it is still able, it is, yes, very easy to adapt it so that it can evade security appliances. But the fact that it is still some of the baseline configurations for it are still evading SEGs is something that is kind of surprising in this day and age. But at the same time, that's, again, why human vetted intelligence capabilities like ours is so important, because we are looking at this every day and identifying any types of morphs or updates, so that way you can use your baseline rule sets, but being enabled by an intelligence function on top of that to make sure that you are better protected. The last one that I want to see here, that I wanted to mention here, is the Mispadu or Mispadu. This is again not new per se, but the activity that we've monitored in Q2 was kind of new to us, an upward trend in it. This is related to a banker malware, or it is a banker malware that was primarily targeting Spanish-speaking nations. It's so while it is technically global, we saw it very concentrated in certain geographic regions. So that's another reason that intelligence is so important here. Is we are looking at things not just from by volume, what is the most important. We're also breaking it down by geographic areas, by attack types, and who is being targeted. As I mentioned earlier, Max is definitely the expert in this area. So as we transition to the next slide here, I'll hand it off to you to dive in deeper on that one and give some more details. Max?
All right, so here we have some most prevalent malware for Q2 2024, divided into, as you can see, the malware types. And on the right, we have the top malware family for each type. As usual, keyloggers were the most popular by a large margin, led, of course, by Agent Tesla Keylogger, which Jared was just talking about. And then in second place, we have remote access Trojans, commonly known as rats. In Q1, they were led by STR-RAT, which we will talk about a little bit later, but they were actually replaced by Remco's rat for the most popular rat this quarter. And we'll talk about an interesting trend with Remco's rat on the next slide as well. So in third place, we have information stealers. They're in the same position as they were in Q1, and they're still also led by Formbook, which is pretty consistent. Formbook is not the most complicated, but it's consistently used by threat actors. So the loader malware type was in position 4 in Q1, and it got replaced by bankers, which was due almost entirely to high volumes of Mispadu, which Jared talked about earlier. And then finally, in the last position, this was the other category last quarter, and other typically consists of reconnaissance tools and other basic things like that. And it was actually replaced by ransomware this quarter, which was unusual, particularly due to Lockbit campaigns. So here we have the top 10 malware families, as you can see. You may notice the blue bar noting Agent Tesla Keylogger seems oddly consistent in the first 2 months of Q2. This is because Agent Tesla volume is actually truncated at 9 and 16% for those months, because otherwise you can't really see any of the trends with the other malware families. And another trend to note is, despite Remco's rat being the most popular rat in Q2, you can see it actually declined over the course of Q2. So it was most popular overall, but we're seeing decreased usage as time goes on. So here, of course, we have the top 5 delivery mechanisms. Interestingly enough, the top 5 delivery mechanisms from Q1 were consistent. A few of them have switched positions, but it's the same top 5. CVE 2017-11882 is, as pretty much always, the most popular, but it did see a significant decline in volume. So in second place, we have VBS downloaders. They remained in the same position with only a slight increase in volume. And then PDF droppers increased from 5th place in Q1 to 3rd place in Q2. PDFs are ubiquitous. They're used everywhere, so their inclusion in the top 5 is pretty much guaranteed. .NET loaders, which had actually been 2nd in Q1, fell to 4th place, but they did still remain in the top 5, of course. So as I mentioned, CVE 2017-11882 is consistently the most popular delivery mechanism with threat actors. So we feel that it's necessary to give a breakdown of exactly what it delivers. Unsurprisingly, Agent Tesla Keylogger remained the most popular malware family. And there was actually very little change from what we saw in Q1, with the exception of NanoCore Rat actually no longer being delivered by CVE 2017-11882 in Q2. So that was a little bit of a surprise to us. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jared. He's actually going to cover some of the file extensions that we've seen in seg-protected environments.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Max. Yeah, I just wanted to hop in here really quick because we do have a team of engineers here who are constantly updating our automation pipelines here to specifically look at, well, a lot of things, but specifically in this case, file extensions on phishing email attachments. So the issue, as you guys know here, is that attachments are used for legitimate purposes, right? And anytime that there's a legitimate vector, it creates a sense of comfort by end users, right? It's expected communication, but it's also obviously a target for threat actors to exploit. So you can see here by the volumes, what we're seeing by far and away the most is the .zip, right? And .zip or as an archive file is just meant to gather multiple different file types, compress them into a single file, package them up so it can be attached easier. As most of you know here, it's pretty easy to then just hide something malicious in there, an executable, a bin, something like that. So you can't just block all .zips, or you can, but you may be missing some legitimate communication from your customers, your partners, however you're conducting your business. So malware scanning obviously is very important, embedded within your email client. But at the same time, there always needs to be training that goes on top of this, right? Is this expected, right? Is this attachment coming from a source that you are expecting to receive an attachment from? Do you have, a message chain that you're looking at or that has led to this delivery? If it's an unsolicited email that's just delivering something like a .html as an attachment, just don't click on it, right? Your seg should be grabbing a lot of these things if they can scan it correctly. I know that recently we have reported a TTP, a technique of procedure, that we have noticed within the past, more than just this past quarter. Really, it's been the past like 6 to 9 months where threat actors are they are appending the legitimate domain string in front of a malicious string for URLs. And they're doing that to basically mimic what a seg appliance would do to say that a file is legitimate. So at the end of the day, when a seg is seeing that, it says, "Oh, hey, this is a legitimate format here. I don't need to scan it." But obviously, there's still that malicious link within that's embedded within the URL. So that's one of those things where like you just have to be very careful with it, right? We need to continue to update our rule sets. We need to continue to have human vetted intelligence coming over top and saying like, hey, this is bad. This is a trend that we're seeing here. This is a human action that is meant to fool automated appliances. Right in the middle of the chart there, though, you can see the .exes. Still kind of baffles us that .exe files are allowed through any type of email communication, right? An exe being an executable, you double click on it and it runs a program. I can't imagine any scenario where that would actually be legitimate or expected. That is definitely something that you need to have training to all of your end users to say, like, look at the extension. We've got a lot of content on that. We've got a lot within our security awareness training platform here at CoFence that can teach you how to best protect yourselves. But yeah, these are all pretty legitimate, or at least common file formats here. PDF, right? Like we can't just block all PDFs. PDFs are more than not legitimate and expected traffic, whether it's invoices or just documentation that you're transmitting as an attachment. Your appliances should be able to scan PDFs, scan them aggressively too, right? For embedded links within the PDFs themselves. But again, it always comes down to multiple avenues of defense, right? Train your employees, make them aware, make them suspicious. Max, back to you.
All right, so here we have a breakdown of the top C2 command and control servers used by threat actors. So these C2s are used to deliver just about any kind of phishing campaign, command malware, etc. They're most frequently used as exfiltration points. Overall volume remained about the same. unsurprisingly, the United States continued to maintain the #1 spot by a large margin. This is likely because of all of the free dynamic hosting services that are technically based in the US. As you can see, Germany remained in second place and only saw a slight decrease in volume. Bulgaria actually appeared in the top 5 in Q2, but it dropped out in Q1 and was replaced by the United Kingdom. And that's of particular interest because the United Kingdom has not been seen in the top 5 in some time. So next up, I'm going to cover some of the notable campaigns and developments that we had in Q2. So this is strategic reporting, that sort of thing, where we typically go a little bit more in depth and give you some context that may be missing otherwise. So this is our first one that we had. It's a 5-year historical overview of Agent Tesla Keylogger. Agent Tesla Keylogger first appeared in 2014, but it didn't really gain prominence until 2019, in Cofence's feeds at least. As we said, it's really popular, and the biggest reason is that it's simplistic and it doesn't take much knowledge to operate. The paid malware as a service versions have pretty solid tech support on standby to help with even like the most basic of stuff. So threat actors who just don't really know what they're doing can easily use it for relatively cheap because the malware as a service versions of Agent Tesla are quite cheap. So a quick overview of the trend analysis suggests that Agent Tesla Keylogger campaigns are going to continue with their obvious upward trajectory yearly. As you can see, 2021 does have significantly higher volume, but this can, of course, as y'all can probably guess, be attributed to the pandemic. According to the FBI, there was a 400% increase in cyber attacks. So Agent Tesla is definitely not excluded from that. It may seem a bit odd that the bar on the far right is so low. It is important to note that the strategic report for this data was done at the beginning of Q2 in April. So the significantly lower volume of Agent Tesla seen in Q2 represents like 25% of the volume we would expect if the trends continue. I'm going to quickly make this a little bit bigger for this one. So this report explores some of the inner workings of a pretty advanced phishing campaign that we saw that was capable of bypassing multi-factor authentication and targeted meta business accounts. So Cofence discovered a pretty comprehensive toolkit that enabled threat actors to create malicious links, verify if they're active, generate emails, and do just a bunch of bad stuff. As it stands, the campaign is really proficiently crafted with pretty advanced phishing emails. We saw that they were directed at users in 19 different countries and used a variety of languages, but they still all looked pretty good, which is not something that we would necessarily expect from threat actors to be able to use multiple languages and still have consistent narratives. So each of the emails appeared to come from Meta, typically claiming stuff like there's a policy violation, copyright infringement, that sort of thing. And should the campaign succeed, followers of the compromised Facebook business account are likely going to be at risk of additional potentially targeted attacks using Facebook, which is not really a normal attack vector. So malicious ad campaigns coming from what they believe is a trusted source. And in the chain here, you can see the pretty convincing pages that we have in each of the steps involved in it. As you can see, each of the steps is carefully designed to look legitimate, in particular the last step where it focuses on MFA bypass. So here we talked about Office documents in general, just Office 365 software. So Excel, Microsoft Word, etc. They're such a popular delivery mechanism for obvious reasons. They're used for a lot of legitimate business purposes. This strategic report in particular covered Office macros, CVE 2017-11882, CVE 2017-0199, embedded URLs, and QR codes, because those are some of the most common things that we've seen. Here you can see a clip of a simple Office document which has a clickable link embedded in it. Because the link requires interaction and it's not like a macro or anything that gets auto-launched, segs seem to be not particularly good at catching them. This is especially true for QR codes and Office documents, and we've really seen an increase in that recently. It looks like the threat actors might actually have a tool that auto-generates them, so it's definitely a concern that we're tracking right now. So here we did a malware baseline. We've been doing these recently, where we try to provide some context and background on a well-known threat so people have a bit more information on it. So in this case, we covered STRRAT because it was so popular in Q1. It was first seen in 2020. It is technically capable of keylogging, basic credential theft, delivering additional malware payloads. It claims that it has ransomware capabilities, but those capabilities only consist of renaming file extensions. There's no actual encryption. So it can fool people who don't really know any better, but as soon as you get a professional in there, it's going to be pretty obvious that everything's fine. It's been seen in multiple seg-protected environments, which is pretty disappointing because, as you can see, the number one method of delivery is a direct attachment. So these are just .jar files. So STRRAT frequently gets updates, and then it'll become popular for a short period of time, like it did in Q1. And then it recedes in popularity as the threat actors switch to a more recently updated malware. But the next time it gets updated, we can expect to see another uptick. So we also did a baseline on PDF delivery mechanisms because we talk about them a lot, and they're definitely highly utilized and difficult to block source for threat actors. They're known for bypassing segs, and it's just really hard to deal with them. So the ones that we focused on are ones that had embedded links, QR codes. Technically, PDFs can have attachments, but those haven't really been popular in years. So recently, the most frequently seen use of PDFs by threat actors is QR codes like the one you see here, because QR codes are really difficult for segs to detect. It enables threat actors to generate pretty large campaigns that are highly effective with pretty minimum effort. And as we talked about in this report and some of our other reports, QR codes are particularly popular because they get people to use their cell phones, which typically don't have the same protections that enterprise computers do. So here we have a new campaign that we found. We decided to call this rat Poco Rat, and it's a relatively straightforward rat that targets Spanish language victims. It was first observed in early 2024. It mainly focused on companies in the mining sector, and it's delivered via embedded links to 7-zip archives that contain executables, and these are consistently hosted on Google Drive. So that little Electro Repuestos image you see there is actually a link to download the malware from Google Drive. And they carefully designed the archives so that Google Drive can't scan them, which enables them to use, pretty known legitimate sources to host malware. The malware focuses primarily on anti-analysis. It does have other features, but they're fairly limited. What really brought this to our attention and made it so concerning that we'd write a report on it is that because it's using Google Drive links, segs just really have trouble with it because they just default trust Google Drive, and as a result, threat actors can pretty easily abuse that trust. And talking about that trust abuse has been a pretty consistent theme with us because, unless you have somebody who's inherently suspicious of things that are technically legitimate, you're going to have a bad time. So now I'm going to hand it over to Jared as he covers some of the top credential phishing trends.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that is super interesting. That actually caught me off guard. I remember when you found that use case there, when you and your team did, and it looked like a PDF attachment. I mean, on first glance, you think like, oh, it's just a PDF, but it's actually a link to a Google Drive location, or really just a cloud hosted location with some malicious content in it. So again, that's one of those, like Max was just saying, suspicious things, right? You just have to be suspicious. You just have to trust your gut on these. There's a lot of different methods that you can do, right? So like hovering over it before you click on it to see if the link pops up. Because obviously, if you're hovering over something that looks like a PDF attachment and it pops up with a URL, that's something, right? So should it be caught by security appliances? Yes, but those have to be continuously updated, right? Like we've talked about that multiple times here. So yeah, really, really great stuff. So I'll start talking about the credential phishing trends here, just to kind of wrap this up. And being cognizant of the time, I see we have a lot of questions in here as well, and we want to get to them too. So we'll get through this in a couple minutes. So here we look at the historic comparison, first 2 quarters of this year versus the first 2 quarters of the previous year, 2023. So the reason why we do this is really just to answer one question: is why, right? So we saw a pretty big decline between the quarters within the same year, but also we had fewer threat campaign events in 2024 than we did in 2023 during the same time frame. So we ask why, right? And as always, right, within intelligence, the answer is always it depends, right? So there's a lot of contributing factors. You've heard me say that before here, but our job is to try and put our thumb on it. What was that, and why are we seeing such a notable decrease in just volume here, just raw volume? And I think many of you probably already picked up on what the first major contributor here is, because I mentioned it previously, but multinational law enforcement operations. These have been extremely successful, right? We always look at it with a degree of skepticism, saying like, well, hey, how successful can it be if they're just taking the infrastructure offline? If they are arresting anybody, it might be like 1 or 2 people, not the entire network. Much to our chagrin, we have been, from what we have monitored, we have been extremely impressed with the positive effect that it's had against particularly these massive global botnets. In particular, within Q2, right in the middle of Q2, Operation Endgame, so a massive named operation, included many different nations and their law enforcement agencies. Operation Endgame, it targeted several large botnets. These included, Peekabot, TrickBot, and a host of others. What this did was, as you see in the graph there, the red and blue lines, it really just it crippled the volume, right? But volume also meaning the amount of attacks, their ability to actually conduct campaigns, and much like we saw in the beginning of Q3 of 2023, where they targeted just specifically CACBot, we saw that here. It took off at least 6 big notable botnets. It took them offline. They are still around, but they are a mere shadow of what their previous operating capacity was. So love to see it. Big shout outs and to the law enforcement agencies who are continuing to wage this war against these threat actors. And as always, Cofense Intelligence will continue to monitor the effects and the fallout, see what pops up in the rise of this. So things like increased use of remote access Trojans, for example, as we highlighted earlier here. Also, I would be remiss not to mention that the black line there being Q2 of 2023 did see that large uptick in month 2. So April of last year. And again, we ask why. Well, that was the last time we saw Emotet actually, peak above the surface. So we'll knock on wood that we don't see it again. But even then, that was the last notable campaign that we saw globally for Emotet. And it wasn't even at the volumes that we are used to seeing historically as well. So hopefully it stays dead. Hopefully the threat actors that were abusing that as an attack vector continue to be focused on other things and not using Emotet. right? So we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. The top 10 top level domains in each stage here. We like to highlight this just to show, where the malicious content is being hosted. All right, so you can see, but the comparison between stage 1 and stage 2, right? We hit on this a little bit earlier. There have been some minor shifts, as you can see from the top 10, but overall it's nothing that's too controversial a topic. .com by far and away, it's the original TLD. So it continues to host content, right? Most of the time it's the easiest to obtain. But what we did see that I thought was pretty interesting was what we highlighted with the .ru earlier. So I won't speak too much in depth about that because we already covered it. But that 7% decrease quarter over quarter still put it on the top 10 list, or still maintained its position within the top 10 list for stage 2 deliveries. I think that's probably about all we can cover that is notable on here, other than, we did mention the Mispadu banker Trojan, targeting primarily Spanish-speaking countries. And you can see that reflected here in both the stage 1 and stage 2 top 10s with the com.br, right? That's Brazil. So that's infrastructure hosted down there. That was a reason why we are seeing that persist within the top 10 for both stage 1 and 2. Now, within just the .com domains, you're seeing a lot of hosting services, right? And thus, they are being abused. So across the quarters here, it kind of shifts around. But recently, and by recently, I'd say within the past 9 to 12 months, Cloudflare seems to have to be used quite a bit more by threat actors than in the year prior. I believe that this is because they actually released it and enabled much more simplified and easier to use hosting services, right? And Cloudflare is pretty massive within cyberspace, not just for their hosting, but also for their domain routing and a whole slew of other infrastructure things. So that's why I believe that we started to see it being abused more and more. But you have all the usual suspects in here too, right? You've got SharePoint, or just Microsoft Azure, AWS, and Google services. So I know we do have a question in there, and so I'll speak to it when we get to the Q&A here. There was a question about what it looks like and how we can protect ourselves from malicious content and hosted services. So I will get to that after we cover the projections. So, what do we suspect that we're going to be seeing here in Q3? I know we're already almost halfway through Q3, but this is really Q3 and beyond. And so we'll do another one of these sessions here in a couple months to talk about the Q3 retro analysis and looking forward into Q4 and in 2025. So we're predicting that embedded links in PDFs will increase. Again, PDFs are legitimate and expected traffic. So it's just it creates that environment, that trusted environment, and threat actors will continue to exploit that. It's somewhere that they already have one foot in the door, if you will. So we suspect that embedding links within there. You receive a PDF, you click on something in there, it takes you to the stage 1 or even directly to a stage 2, like downloading a file from a file share, right? So that's definitely going to continue to increase because it's been accepted. It bypasses security appliances, rightfully so, and it will continue to be exploited, right? Because it's been successful. One really unique thing that we have noticed recently, as we were kind of harping on the whole .exe, the executable files being permitted in some say protected environments. It's not all, but in some we are still seeing it and then bypassing segs, which again seems kind of ridiculous, but it happens. Well, one thing that threat actors are doing is they're finding unique ways to actually get around the scanning by security appliances. And one of the methods that we're seeing now is file names with Unicode in right to left as opposed to left to right, which most Western languages, Latin-based languages, do left to right. So by reversing that order, it is still routable, still executable, but it cannot be recognized because the more simple rule sets of some of the security appliances are just looking for that last 3 or 4 characters at the end of a file name to denote the extension, right? So
what's particularly interesting about this one is most of the techniques that we see really just go after vulnerabilities in the segs and things that segs can't handle. But this technique of making the file extension disappear also targets users, because even users who have file extensions turned on, when they look at this file, they're going to see .pdf. They're not going to see that it's wrapped and it's actually .exe. So this is a pretty unique tactic that we're seeing, and unfortunately it looks like it's going to be increasing because it's just one of the few things that's good at tricking both people and segs.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it is weird. Can't say I like it, but it is interesting to us in our acquisitive minds, right? So, yeah, as always, Max and his team will continue to monitor it, to note and to report up on it, research further, and report and notify all of our customer base for ways that we can actually help mitigate it. So the third one is authentication themed emails will increase. This is kind of one of those, like, we see themes trending over time. And this time of year in particular, well, not in particular, but this time of year, and based off of the recent trend lines that we've been monitoring, authentication theme seems to be increasing gradually. And I think that a lot of that is because, again, it's just successful, right? Like, click here to reset your password, those types of things. It is, again, it's one of those, like, creating a comfortable environment to lower the guard of the human user. And they think, okay, hey, I need to click here to log in, or to reset my password, or to view a communication of something. So that, it is, again, that air of legitimacy that lowers people's guards, and perhaps they click on it without giving it a second thought. So we'll continue to monitor that as well, and notify of any notable campaigns and TTPs associated with that. We all have also seen, to the fourth point there, some crypto themed attacks happening more. We're definitely seeing an uptick in it. Again, it's another gradual trend line, but we suspect that it's going to continue to go up, just based off of not just the mention of crypto, but IOCs that are historically related to campaigns that were targeting crypto wallets and theft of cryptocurrencies. So we'll keep an eye on it. If that is part of your business and critical operations there, be aware of it. Look for more reporting to come out from our guys here. And then lastly, we were mentioning the Brazilian bankers quite a few times here. We believe, though, that banker type malware will continue to increase. I think we were already seeing it, these massive campaigns specifically targeting Spanish speaking nations, but it's not limited to that. And I think that with the success that they're already seeing in those geographic regions, that it's going to continue to be implemented elsewhere. Max, did you want to say anything more about the bankers?
Yeah, I can absolutely hop on with that one. So one of the reasons that bankers are not historically all that popular is that, honestly, rats can do most of what bankers can. The biggest difference is that bankers typically focus on browser manipulation. So they will redirect you to websites that look like your bank's website, and they'll steal your credentials through the browser instead of keylogging. So they can do some pretty advanced, 2FA bypass, things like that typical rats can't. So they're more advanced, but they're less frequently used because people who don't know what they're doing, which is a lot of threat actors, just can't utilize them to their full potential. So the fact that we're seeing an increase in these, so we've got like KR Banker, we've got Miss Patty, we've got Grandorio, a bunch of other ones, really means that people are shifting their focus and not really being as obsessed with easy to use rats as they have been in the past.
Yeah, excellent insights. Us being over paranoid here as an intelligence shop, I don't know why people would ever access their personal bank accounts from corporate emails. It's one of those things where, if you receive communications unsolicited, especially via your corporate email, to log into your personal bank, that should probably throw off some alarms, at least at the human level. It's very difficult to have an automated machine recognize that. But again, that's why you need intelligence analysis functions who are publishing things like this. So hypervigilance, right, at all times. But yeah, we definitely predict that we're going to see an increase in banker types. I think to your point though, it's also less noisy, right? A keylogger, something that's often local on the machine, right? An exploit that's being launched locally. Whereas, the bankers are all web-based. Not all, but for the most part are web-based, and will ultimately forward you after they harvest your credentials, forward you to the legitimate bank page too, right? So you might not even know that your credentials have been stolen.
Well, sometimes they'll even actually log you into the bank page. So it's a completely seamless transition. So you have absolutely no idea that something happened.
Yeah, it's pretty smart. Well, okay. So questions. We do have questions. We have a lot of questions. I know that we're getting to the top of the hour here too. So I do apologize if we cannot get to all of your questions. We will follow up afterwards here. But I do see a couple that I'd really like to highlight. Really quick, I can answer several of these. So one of our attendees asked, what threats are most prevalent in healthcare industries? So I don't have that information off the top of my head, but the reason why I wanted to answer this, Max can, but let me, go ahead.
I actually saw that, and I pulled up something that we're actually working on right now. So unsurprisingly, Microsoft is the most spoofed brand for almost anything, but that's particularly true for healthcare. It looks like it's like 92% spoofed. Whereas we've got like the next big name brand is Adobe at only like 3%. And then we have some generic webmail things at like 0.5%. So unsurprisingly, most of what the healthcare sector is facing is Microsoft themed ones.
So spoofed brands, right?
Yeah, spoofed brands.
And they're doing credential harvesting? Is it Credfish?
Yeah, it's mostly Credfish. Okay. Just a lot of Microsoft spoofing things. So 2FA stuff, the typical password alert stuff from Microsoft, just that sort of thing. Okay. Most of them are pretty straightforward, though. If you look at the from address and it's not Microsoft, which is the case almost all of the time, then, you can go, maybe this isn't legitimate.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that's a lot of information to digest right up front here. So obviously you can, use ThreatHQ to do research like this. We do identify by the NAICS code for the industry and sector. However, we do fully acknowledge that that's not it's not as easy to digest, right? And doing your own research can take some time. So in that spirit, actually, in the second half of this year, we are creating a new report that is specifically meant to highlight these threats that are targeting individual or their targets and what sectors they are, what types of threats they are. So it'll break it down using content and producing content that's much more relevant to you based off of, what sector you're residing in, but also what line of business you're in and those types of things. So definitely look forward to that later this year. That is something that we have had requested by many of our customers. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up here. And we will definitely have some better content, some more easily digested content for you very soon. So I have another question here that states, we've had a major increase of legitimate emails containing files with malicious links or even non-malicious links that point to a legitimate file sharing website with malicious links in those files, which all bypass our email scanning, URL scanning. What can we do to prevent this? Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I know we actually covered it a little bit here in some of the latter slides. These hosting services are being abused, right, to host malicious content. I think that it's kind of incumbent on those service providers to have better scanning. They should have URL tracing just for links that are leading to stage 2s if it's being hosted on AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or Cloudflare, right? But I can only do so much in telling, these large companies how to do their job. What I can say is that having timely intelligence, enabling your rule sets and your watch listing, right? That can help here, right? So that's what we provide to all of our customers here. We are constantly looking at IOC and identifying IOCs, categorizing them by criticality, by effect to critical asset. And then we can use those, you can ingest those within your security appliances to update your rule sets. So not only do you have like your standard baseline rule sets, you'll also have some human vetted intelligence on top of that. Max, I know that was one of your slides. You were talking about the file hosting, and is there anything else you wanted to add to it?
Honestly, it's a lot of it is stuff that, like you said, the hosting provider really should do. So for example, with Google Drive, if a file is more than a certain number of megabytes, Google Drive won't even scan it. It'll just give it to you and say, hey, I couldn't scan this. But you can download it and like get infected if you want. Like they're just, I'm not going to say lazy, but it just takes too much processing power for them to scan these files. So it really puts the onus on you. Unfortunately, that's just how that is. They just kind of pushed it off on you. So that's kind of why a lot of what we do, that's why we do it, is training people so that when they see something from Google Drive and Google Drive says, I can't scan this, the person who's looking at it goes, maybe there's a reason they can't scan it. Just having that skepticism and not trusting things the way that SEGs trust things is really the best way to protect yourself.
Yeah, I think it's multi-source, right? It's the human being one of the sources of suspicion, right? Like, yeah, be trained, be suspicious, be vigilant, but don't just trust one security appliance, right? And so whether it's Cofense Intelligence that is further enabling as a force multiplier for your security appliances, then so be it. Great, love to have you here. But also, there's other services that have similar intelligence functions, or even if it's not intelligence, if it's just rapid cybersecurity rule set and IOC identification, like some other people in the industry do as well. Having multiple sources of data to corroborate and to make sure that you are getting as much of that watch list capability as possible. This is why 0 days exist, right? Because nobody knows about them until one person sees it and then they report it up, right? So who's going to be the first to see it? It's not the same person every time. So yeah, the more rule sets, the more sources of information, of good information that you can bring in, the better. All right. So what? Oh, good.
I will say, a big part of this is you're protected by other people. So for example, I've noticed that for whatever reason, people in the hospitality sector are particularly good at spotting Google Drive URLs that lead to malware. They're just really good at it. So we're able to leverage that, and we're able to say, okay, this Google Drive link delivers malware, and we can send it to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, yeah, we are a couple minutes over, so being respectful of everybody's time, and greatly appreciate everybody coming here. I do see that there were a lot of questions about AI. I know that our CEO mentioned it a few times, so I would like to say that to at least address that, because we could talk for the rest of the day about AI, ML, LLMs, all of that. What we do have though is another webinar coming up, a seminar, if you will, on August 28th. That is going to specifically be talking about AI. So I do encourage you to go to cofense.com, take a look at our events section, register for that. We can ask more specific questions and get more details on that. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for attending the Q2 webinar here. We greatly appreciate all the questions that you had. Hopefully you got something good out of this. Greatly appreciate the staff that supported this as well. And thanks to Max for joining us here. Please reach out to us at any time at Cofense. Again, visiting our website, reach out to our support email there. And we look forward to hearing from you. So thanks again. Appreciate you all.